Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to unbox, reveal, discuss, and upgrade the Commander Legends Dungeons & Dragons Battle for Baldur's Gates sealed commander deck of Draconic Dissent. Thank you for choosing MTG Burgeoning for your Magic the Gathering content. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoy this video and consider becoming a subscriber. Doing so supports the channel and makes you eligible for our various subscriber rewards series. If you would like to support the channel further, then click the link to our Patreon page in the description below. There you can join our ongoing Pack Wars series as a 1-month supporter or ongoing member. Or try joining Pack Wars for free by commenting on every MTG Burgeoning video in a month. We strive to offer creative rewards through our various Patreon tiers. So if Pack Wars isn't for you, then something else will be. Links to our content and various subscriber rewards series can be found in the description below. Send us an email, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We are your channel for all things magic. Hello, greetings, and salutations to the MTGBC. You are the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome to this installment of our ongoing Let's Open Up a Sealed Commander Deck and Talk About It series. Today we've got Draconic Dissent, so let's liberate the contents of this package and feast on the goodies inside. All right, so we're going to begin with the sweet deck box. Well, hopefully it's a sweet deck box. All right, that's going to leave that empty for recycling, of course. We have our little punch out tabs and the okay, so Wizards went back to the standard black card divider. The last set of decks that we talked about when they came out with Streets of New Capenna, they were a little bit different than this because they had actual set symbols of each of the different families. But I can understand them going right back. These card dividers, for me, invaluable. I use them constantly. All right, so we got the little punch-out things that we just talked about. And inside we have, yep, just like the last time we went through the commander decks, the box comes out damaged, but again, this is not really a very stable box. This isn't really going to keep many of your cards safe, if any. So let's just spill the contents out. We have more packaging, which we'll get rid of. We have our life spinner, of course, and our This Is How You Play. That goes right there. There's our sweet deck. And of course, we have the sample pack collector booster. Those are the contents of Draconic Dissent. So now let's get to the sweet commander and the 99. So our front-facing commander is Firkaag, Cunning Instigator. And that is going to be the commander that we would continue to build around as we get further into this video and start talking about ways in which to upgrade this deck. Firkaag, Cunning Instigator. Come on, camera, get in the game. There we go. It's a 3/3 legendary dragon with flying and haste for 3 and Izzet colors. Whenever one or more dragons we control attack an opponent, we go to target creature that player controls. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, if that creature had to attack this combat, we put a +1/+1 counter on Firkaag and we draw a card. So we definitely want dragons into this deck, and we definitely want a lot of ways in which to force our opponent's creatures to attack our opponents. So going forward, Firkaag, you are our front-facing and our lead general for this video. As a backup, we have Baloth, Baritone Entertainer. It's a 2/5 legendary elf shaman for 4 and a red. Creatures our opponents control with power less than Baloth's power are goaded. So his power is only 2, so we really want to try to bump that up. And whenever a goaded attacking or blocking creature dies, we create a treasure token. So this legendary creature has the choose a background mechanic, which will allow us to make sure that we can use the blue background so that we can continue with the Izzet deck. Oh, I hope I didn't say Simic earlier. Izzet. This is definitely Izzet. So to pair the background with Baloth, we have Clan Crafter, 1 and a blue legendary enchantment. Commander creatures we own have pay 2, sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and draw. So as the goaded creatures die and we create the treasure tokens, if we don't want to use that for mana, we can use those as sacrifice fodder to put a +1/+1 counter onto Baloth and to draw a card. So for the purposes of moving forward, with these being the commander options, we're going to stick with Firkaag because that's what we really want to do in this deck. We want dragons to force our opponents to attack each other, and we want to make sure that whenever a creature deals that combat damage to one of our opponents, by our hand forcing them through Firkaag's goading ability or through any other goading spells or effects present in the 99, so that we can make Firkaag bigger and so we can draw those cards. So in addition to the brand new primary commander option of Firkaag and the dual commander option, also brand new, of Baloth and Clan Crafter, after these 3 new additions to the Magic catalog, there are 7 other brand new cards that are in this Draconic Dissent deck, and let's review those very quickly. Here is our first. It is Artificer Class. So we do have an enchantment class in this deck. To start things off by paying 1 and a blue, the first artifact spell we cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. So how about a Soul Ring for free? If we move to level 2 by paying another 1 and a blue, we get to reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal an artifact card. We can put that card into our hand and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. Depending on how you want to try to abuse level 2, if you minimize the number of artifacts that are put into the 99 of this deck so that the one you hit is a very powerful option indeed, that is definitely a path to take. If not, this is it, and that's generally a very good breeding ground for many different types of artifact synergies. Of course, the choice is up to you. If I were constructing, or let me reframe that, if I were reconstructing the 99 of this deck, I would choose the option of, let's get an artifact card that's really going to, let's say, make our opponents moan and groan when they see it go to our hand. And lastly, when this becomes level 3, at the beginning of our end step, we create a token that's a copy of target artifact we control. With enough mana on our side of the battlefield, maybe through some ramp, maybe through some treasure tokens. Boy, wouldn't that be something if we were putting out tokens of Blightsteel Colossus every turn. All right, next up, and a new dragon, is Astral Dragon, 6 and 2 blue. Now, we are in Izzet colors, so outside of getting some mana rocks onto our side of the battlefield, or generating some kind of treasure tokens, or finding some way to cheat this guy onto the battlefield, this guy's going to be in our hand for quite some time. 6 and 2 blue is no joke. It's a 4/4 flyer. When it does eventually ETB, we create 2 tokens that are copies of target non-creature permanents, except they're 3/3 dragon creatures in addition to their other types, and they have flying. So, for example, we'll put this bad boy down, and let's say we just copy a couple of Soul Rings. We can use Soul Ring for a lot of the examples for the new cards in this deck. And suddenly we have a 4/4 flyer, and we also have 2 3/3 dragons that can tap for 2 colorless mana. Astral Dragon, even though it has a mana value of 8, it does bring some ETB shenanigans to this deck. Next, we have Mocking Doppelganger. This is a 3 and a blue with flash, and it's a shapeshifter that's 0/0. Big surprise. We may have Mocking Doppelganger ETB as a copy of a creature an opponent controls, except it has other creatures with the same name as this creature are goaded. So this could be, on the surface, a great way to lock down one of our opponent's most powerful creatures just to make sure that it's attacking our other opponents and not ourselves. ourselves. However, if we scratch a little bit below the surface, notice that it says other creatures with the same name as this creature are goated. So if one of our opponents is sitting behind an army of tokens that are just soldiers, guess what? Soldier is going to be what gets goated, and every other creature with that name. So Mocking Doppelganger gives us a lot of options as it pertains to goating one creature, or perhaps a lot of creatures with the same name. Next card up, and probably my favorite new card from the Draconic Dissent deck, and that is going to be Bothersome Quasit. 2 and a red, it's a demon, it's 3/2 with menace. Goated creatures our opponents control can't block. So for anyone who's ever historically sat down to try to create, craft, cultivate a deck that has goad as one of the featured mechanics, one of the sticking points, one of the problems is that the creatures can just simply get blocked down by the opponent that's being attacked. And without any retribution, our goad ability becomes worthless because the creatures end up doing nothing but getting blocked. Well, this means that this isn't going to happen because any of the creatures that are goated, they become unblockable. As an example, if we goad one of our opponent's creatures, and then if opponent 2 decides to attack opponent 1, maybe because of some kind of back alley deal or some kind of political shenanigans, they could just use that creature, the goated creature, to block, and then the creature ends up dying. Not in this instance, and this makes Bothersome Quasit, it really synergizes so well with the goad mechanic. It really makes it a force now because we have so much more support for that ability. And lastly, whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we can goad a target creature an opponent controls. So it also has the ability to goad creatures as well. My favorite card in this deck. Next up, we have Death Kiss, a 5/5 Beholder for 5 and a red. Whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks one of our opponents, we double its power until end of turn. So that's going to incentivize our opponents to attack each other and likely keep those creatures on the battlefield if they're able to have some other form of, maybe it's a first strike, maybe it's some kind of protection, or maybe it's some kind of indestructibility. Who knows? We have a lot of ways in which to work with the 99 of this deck. And this also has the Monstrosity ability. This is Monstrosity X, so we pay X twice, and then we pay a red mana. And when Death Kiss becomes monstrous, we goad up to X target creatures our opponents control. Now, just for the purposes of clarity, for anyone who's not familiar with the XX cost, you simply pay X 2 times. So if you want to goad 3 creatures, you pay X3, you pay the second X3, and you pay 1 red mana. So you're investing a total of 7 mana to goad 3 creatures that our opponents control. All right, 2 last cards to talk about for the newbies in this deck. The next one is Loot Dispute. Enchantment, 3 and a red. When it ETBs, we take the initiative and we create a treasure token. To take the initiative, we have it right here. Whenever 1 or more creatures a player controls deals combat damage to us, that player then takes the initiative. And whenever you take the initiative, and at the beginning of your upkeep, we get to venture into the Undercity. So this is a very small component woven into this Izzet deck. This would most likely be one of the first things that I would try to weed out so that the deck can become a little more optimized and streamlined to the goad mechanic. But that is the Undercity, and those are the different ways in which you can go through this particular dungeon. And after the Loot Dispute ETBs, whenever we attack the player who has the initiative, we create a treasure token. And then lastly, whenever we complete a dungeon, we create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. Now, to go back to that particular dungeon, there are an awful lot of steps to take before that dungeon gets completed, and that's after the initial investment of 4 mana into the spell. So you could see that this is a pretty slow card because we have to complete that dungeon before we can even get around to sniffing a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. Again, Loot Dispute and the small initiative package, I would weave that out of there right away, folks. And the last new card of this deck, it is Spectacular Showdown. We have a sorcery here for 1 and a red where we can put a double strike counter on target creature, then goad each creature that had a double strike counter put on it this way. Think back to what we were just talking about with Bothersome Quasit. Whoops. And so we move forward with that, but it also has the overload mechanic. For 4 and triple red, we're going to cast the spell and we're going to change target to each. So it's put a double strike counter on each creature, then goad each creature that had a double strike counter put on it this way. This should end the game very quickly, particularly if the creatures that are being goaded can really slip through our opponent's defenses and lower their life totals close to or under 0. So with the 10 new cards in the Draconic Dissent deck already out there and discussed, let's talk about all of the other non-land reprints that you can expect to find when you crack open this deck. So here we have both of the Impetuses, the Psychic and the Shiny. The Impetus cycle, not really a fan of that cycle. I think there are a lot better auras or just cards that can replace them. Although, if you are looking to really double down into the goad mechanic, those are a couple of auras that really could be helpful if you so choose. It's just the fact that they are auras, and there's always the threat of being 2 for 1. Of course, we love that Arcane Signet reprint every single time. Burnished Heart with that hilarious new artwork. Mind Stone is another great reprint. Never hurt having enough Mind Stones. Same thing with Wayfarer's Bauble. Same thing with the Command Tower. All right, Compulsive Research is in here. Curse of Verbosity, Propaganda, Curse of Opulence. That's a massive reprint because if you were following this card's value at home, that was getting north, baby. That was really starting to get up there in price. Sprite Dragon, Bloodthirsty Blade. That's going to help with the goad theme of this deck. Thalwar Stone is a fantastic reprint. Hedron Archive is its Signet, and there's our Soul Ring. Never, ever can have enough Soul Rings. Same can be said about the Talismans. There's an Ether Gale reprint. Angler Turtle. Now, some at home might think that this is a brand new card, but no, this was printed in one of those gift packs that Wizards used to do. I think it was for Core 2019 or Core 2020 or one of the first core sets that came back after that brief hiatus after Magic Origins. They had one rare card for each color in addition to a few packs, and the blue one was Angler Turtle. So this technically is its first printing in a set, but not its first print overall. Curse of the Swine, another fantastic removal spell. I'm telling you, blue should not get to do that. Blue should not have the ability to mass exile creatures, even if they're going to be replaced with a Sounder of Swine. Dissipation Field, Domineering Will. Now we're getting into a bunch of the rares. Kaiga, the Midnight Clock, Pursued Whale, Reigns of Power. Very, very underrated this card is. Reigns of Power can be considered a potential game winner, particularly in a deck like this. Sly Instigator. So happy I was to see that both Will and Rowan were in this deck. These will actually be my first copies of the Sibling Planeswalkers. Agitator Ants, the Akroan War. Avatar of Slaughter will get things really hopping. Just pay attention because it's all creatures have double strike and attack each combat if able. That also means that our creatures are being forced into combat as well. And if we are really trying to get into the mode for goad, this might be one of those cards that you might want to replace with a better and safer option. Never can have enough Blasphemous Axe. Brash Taunter, my very first copy. So happy to get this into the catalog. Such a powerful, powerful ability, a la Stuffy Doll from back in the day. But Stuffy Doll never done fought no other creatures. I'll tell you that right now. It only did a point of damage to itself. Brash Taunter could win the game for you folks. Chain Reaction, Chaos Dragon. Again, another card you can't have too many copies of. That is going to be Chaos Warp. Fantastic reprint here, one that was much needed, particularly for the Goad ability. Disrupt Decorum, love to see that card in this deck. There's Dracuseth in all of its monstrous glory. Geode Rager is another good one. Goblin Spymaster. Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs. And there's Rowan to go right next to Will. All right, we got Ryusei, the Territorial Hellkite, the Thunder Dragon, the Vengeful Ancestor, Warmonger Hellkite. Again, similar to Avatar of Slaughter, watch out for this creature. All creatures attack each combat if able. We don't want our creatures to be forced into combat. We just want our opponent's creatures to be forced into combat with each other. Niv Mizzet Perrin, of course, the Dragon's Horde. That's a great reprint. Now, if you're not looking to have too many additional dragons added, which that's one of the first things I would take a look at, is adding some more dragons to this build, particularly because Firkaag synergizes with other dragons, and this deck does not have a ton of them. Keep Dragon's Horde in if you want to go heavy on the dragons. If not, you may want to replace that with a different type of mana rock, because that has a mana value of 3, and you can just, economize down to 2, because if you're not going to go heavy with the dragons, then you're not really going to have the ability to draw the cards. We got Solemn Simulacrum, Steel Hellkite. Oh, and there he is, Stuffy Doll. Didn't even realize it was in the deck. Brash Taunter has left you in the dust, my friend. You have been left in the dust. All right, so those are the reprints in this deck. Not too shabby. Here's a nice little pile of probably more than a dozen, easy, of great reprints that you really want to have in your collection for the purposes of enhancing or building your Commander decks. And next up here, we have the mana base for Draconic Dissent. Now, this is just a 2-color mana base, so it should, in a lot of ways, be awfully simplistic to put together, and that definitely seems to be the avenue that Wizards has taken. The mana base, the land base for this deck is uninspiring. Let's just put it that way. So let's just get right to the lands and exactly what we would need to do to try to enhance maintaining tempo in an Izzet deck like this. So we start off things with Reliquary Tower, and then we have Temple of the False God. These are 2 cards that we see a lot in the pre-constructed Commander decks. Here we have Terrain Generator, which, this is not terrible for the purposes of ramping. We're paying 2 to put a basic land card from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. So technically, this is rampant growth as long as it's in our hand. We can't search our library for it, but Terrain Generator is a decent card, particularly in colors that are not known for ramping. Desolate Lighthouse, draw a card, discard a card. That one's not a bad idea. Here we have Carekeep. Now, Carekeep, this is an interesting addition because we're creating tokens, 0/1s that don't really do anything but sit around, and that doesn't really do anything to help synergize with our deck. Outside of the potential to act as chump blockers to any of our opponent's creatures that might have been haphazardly goaded and they're the only opponent left in the game. But chances are, with a 0/1 and we're sitting down in the Commander format, that those creatures are going to have all kinds of evasion. So I don't know how much, staying power 0/1 tokens are going to have, particularly in a build like this. This would be one of the lands that I would take out and supplement with something else. Ash Barrens, it's going to help us smooth out our mana. So will Myriad Landscape. Here's another one, Path to Ancestry. It does ETB tapped, which generally is not a very good thing, particularly if we're trying to maintain tempo in our deck. However, if we have a strong enough tribal presence with the dragons, then keeping Path of Ancestry would be a great idea because we're going to get a blue or a red, and if we're going to cast a dragon, we're going to get to scry 1. Again, if you take the direction of adding more dragons to the deck, I would suggest keeping Path of Ancestry. If you tend to want to go away from that angle, it might be a good idea to take this card out for one that can provide one of the 2 colors of mana, but doesn't ETB tapped. Similar to this card, Prismari Campus. It ETBs, and it gives us the colors that we need, and we can pay 4 to scry 1. Now, I mean, mid to late game, if you're looking for a mana sink, I have to think there are better options than just dumping 4 mana into this land just to scry 1. I mean, supplement this with all other types of lands that can come into play untapped, like Sulphur Falls, like Stormcarved Coast, like Shivan Reef. There's a lot of different options that would be much better than Prismari Campus. Exact same thing for Izzet Boilerworks, unless you are sure that you can continuously hit those land drops and that you don't become too backed up on mana by having a land come back to your hand. Again, we are not in the colors of ramp, so anytime we take a step back by putting a land into play that comes into play tapped, and we have to bring a land back to our hand, particularly in a non-landfall deck, well, that's going to be up to you and how you want to construct your deck. Here's another one, Temple of Epiphany. It ETB's tapped, and when it does, we scry 1. Is this really worth keeping in here when other options that we've already talked about could be better? I would take that card out. Wandering Fumarole, again, this comes into play tapped. It gives us our colors. But again, this transform, I mean, we could pay the 2 and Izzet colors for this to turn into an elemental creature. But how does that help with our gold synergy? Does that do anything to really make the deck streamlined any better? I mean, what are we going to do? Just keep our mana untapped and use this for the purposes of chump blocking one of our opponent's creatures that might slip past being goaded? I would take that out for a better option. Castle Vantress. This was a fantastic addition. This might be the single best land in the 99 of this pre-constructed deck. This is fantastic. 2 and 2 blue to scry 2. That's a lot better than the Prismari Campus of dumping in 4 just to scry 1. And then we just have our basics. Lots of basic islands and lots of basic mountains. So as you can see, the overall land base of this deck, let's be honest, it was kind of trimmed down, possibly because it was only 2 colors. That might have been Wizards' choice to do so. Either way, it is definitely a land base that could use some, how can we say, refinement if it's a deck that you definitely want to adopt into your normal catalog of EDH decks. And here we have the last of the contents of the Draconic Dissent pre-constructed EDH deck from Battle for Baldur's Gate. Here we have the Firkaag, slightly thicker. This foil is not going to curl, folks, because that is a much thicker piece of cardboard than the ones we're accustomed to seeing. So that's our Firkaag. And then we've already seen our initiative where we go to the Undercity Dungeon. We've got some tokens, Pirate, Boar, the Kobolds of Carekeep. That was for the land that we were talking about earlier. Here's the gold. There's Rowan. There's Rowan's emblem. There's Will's emblem. There's a garbage card that we can just get rid of and recycle. Copy token. There's a dragon. Treasure, an ogre for Kazul, and a goblin, and another goblin, and a third goblin. And there you have it, MTGBC. The contents of the Draconic Dissent pre-constructed EDH deck from Battle for Baldur's Gate. Draconic Dissent is an Izzet deck that features the goad mechanic and wants to reward its pilot with peripheral benefits by forcing its opponents to attack each other. Keeping this dynamic in mind, and with the front-facing commander, Firkaag, Cunning Instigator as the general, the following cards are some possible upgrades to the original deck list, each of which enhances the goad theme of this build. Although the options in the original deck list are slim with only 12 possible selections, Sarkhan's Triumph allows you to tutor for any dragon creature card at instant speed. Since dragons are an important feature in activating our general's goad ability, we should beef up the numbers a bit. Hellkite Charger's absence in this deck is surprising, particularly because of this build's desire to exploit its general's combat-specific abilities. In addition to adding Hellkite Charger, Scourge of the Throne fits into the theme of this deck wonderfully. just as long as you are not sitting atop the throne, and can trigger its dethrone ability upon combat. Speaking of combat, let's include some additional combat benefits. In addition to gleefully watching your opponent's life totals head south, Hellkite Tyrant will pilfer all artifacts from an opponent when it deals combat damage. Ancient Copper Dragon has the potential of creating up to 20 treasure tokens when it deals combat damage to a player. Utvara Hellkite will create dragon creature tokens whenever a dragon you control attacks. Go all in with your combat theme and include Relentless Assault for the purposes of gaining an additional combat phase, which means more goading of your opponent's creatures. As an even more powerful combat addition, consider adding Aggravated Assault. With enough mana at your disposal, a Thunder of Dragons could be sent into combat multiple times during each of your turns. For goading redundancy, add Grenzo Havoc Razor. Even if your opponents do not have any creatures to goad, Grenzo's second ability will continue to put pressure on them by making the top of their libraries extensions of our own hand. And lastly, the criminally underplayed and underloved War's Toll is another way to force your opponent's creatures to attack while also limiting their ability to interact with you and each other. Before you know it, Firkaag's many +1/+1 counters may threaten an opponent with lethal commander damage from your Winged Izzet General. The Draconic Dissent Precon deck further develops the goad mechanic by creating peripheral benefits from forcing opponents' creatures into combat. The design of this deck is quite unique, and there are more than enough cards from Magic's history to support its theme. It's refreshing to see Izzet dabble in combat shenanigans, as opposed to staunchly replicating its spell-slinging archetype in yet another pre-constructed commander deck.